It's Radio Free 501c, the voice of Rogue Tulips Consulting. Don't forget to subscribe. We're on your favorite podcast service. This week, I'm joined by Michael Getter of 501 Evolved. He's a first-time guest and a new solopreneur, and we're going to be diving into the topic of smart and savvy tech for all nonprofits. Welcome to episode 205. Hey everybody, it's Monday, August 7th, and that means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp. I am a certified association executive and a certified nonprofit professional, and thanks for joining us this week. To our global audience, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and thank you as well for joining us from wherever you are in the world. This week, we have first-time guest Misha Getter, who is also a first-time entrepreneur and has launched a new company called 501 Evolved, specializing in helping nonprofits of all sizes maximize their technology infrastructure. So that's what we're going to dive into today. But before we do that, Misha, welcome to the show. Would you like to say hello to our audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Cecilia. And hi, everybody. I am a first-time entrepreneur. I have been in nonprofit space for almost 20 years, providing a technology leadership for a variety of associations, from the smallest one of 7 people to the largest one of 85 people. And that gave me a pretty good understanding of challenges of that associations of different size face when it comes to their technology stack.
Wow. And that is a great summary and a great launching point, because I already have my first question in mind.
Okay.
Longtime listeners know I'm not always prepared with a whole list of questions, but you mentioned challenges when building the Substack. And to me, the biggest challenge, especially for the staff, is understanding how things integrate and work together. Is that the one you found, or did you find a different one?
Well, it's one of several, right? Mm-hmm. One is not fully understanding how technology works, and that may be related to training or not utilizing all the features that are available, because people sometimes just don't have time to learn everything there is to learn about their technology. But overarching challenge is, of course, integration between those systems. And there have been discussions on ASA forum about the promise of integration, where everybody says like, oh yeah, our system is open, we can integrate to anything. And then you bring 2 systems into your ecosystem, and each of them promises ease of integration. And all of a sudden, it ends up being a much bigger problem than you expected, right? Or much more costly than you thought.
That's right, because when they're showing you, they being technology companies, and they want you to buy their product.
Yes.
Oh, sure, it'll work. No problem. You know, it's sort of like my husband and I have a great joke about repairmen or the guys who install your appliances, should work fine. And, and I kind of think sometimes, and I bet you've run into this. One time we had a new dishwasher put in our house where we used to live, and it started leaking when they did the test run. And my husband said to the installer, well, the dishwasher is leaking. And he said, oh, they do that sometimes before they settle in. My husband said, I don't think so. I think we need a different dishwasher, or at least a different installer. So to me, that is a great analogy for what happens a lot of times with technology. You're integrating a new thing into the system, it starts to leak. So what kind of advice do you give to people in that kind of a situation? And, what kind of guidance do you offer them?
Well, generally, my vision that I have been fairly vocal about over the past couple of years is to select systems that offer not just open APIs and open integrations, but that offer out-of-the-box integrations with existing integration platforms. Mm-hmm. And some of you may have heard the term iPaaS, Integration Platform as a Service. And one of the biggest players in the space is Zapier. And many people probably heard about Zapier. It's sometimes advertised on TV or on YouTube. There are other players like Trade.io or Make.com and Shuffle Exchange and Boomi And there is a wide variety of them, and they have different levels of complexity. But Zapier comes to mind because it offers out-of-the-box standard integrations with over 5,000 software products out there, right? Which include Microsoft and Google and DocuSign and Cvent and Amis and MailChimp, you name it. Everything already offers integration with Zapier platform. So if you happen to look for a new system to bring into your IT stack, right? It would probably make sense to first of all look at existing systems that are going to stay with you for a little bit, see if they happen to offer standard integrations with one of those platforms, and then choose the next one that integrates with the platform that may or can already be used based on your existing systems, right? And of course, when I was selecting an AMS, for example, for my past company I worked for, organization I worked for, I didn't just ask them about their APIs and how well they can integrate it with others. And I didn't just talk with their other customers and other organizations that purchase their systems. I also spoke with other vendors and development teams that had to write integrations with them. And I asked them, how was your experience integrating with that vendor? And their feedback to me was even more important than feedback of some other organizations that said, oh yeah, the system worked well. When the developers told me that it was the best experience we've ever had integrating with this particular AMS, because they have the cleanest APIs, the best documentation, and things just work, that meant to me that integration experience overall moving forward will be better.
That is such a great tip. I never ever would think to ask the developers about the integrations.
Yeah.
Because I'm not an IT person. I'm good with technology. I'm my own IT department, but usually you mentioned Zapier. That was about the only one I recognized. You said all the different platforms you can get the integrations from, and of course I use integrations with Google because I use Google Workspace, but wow, never even thought of that. So, but now when people are working together in, any size organization, people get fascinated with a software package, or we need this integration because they decide they like it. Maybe it's a new shiny, bright thing. So what's a way that people could negotiate those things? Like, if somebody comes forward and is like, I really, really think we should use Asana, even though you already have a task management tool built into your system. What's some because you must have to negotiate with people too on these things.
So the question is about how do you negotiate with the internal staff?
Yeah, the internal people, like a staff person just becomes fascinated with something.
Yes, that is a challenge. and sometimes what I see happen, a new employee comes on board, a possibly higher level employee, like a new C level or VP level, head of a department level comes in, who used, let's say, Asana in their previous organization. They used it for like 3, 4, 5 years. They're really comfortable with it. They're very fast with it. So, and they want to use that exact system in the new organization. They came in and said, well, you guys use that. I use Asana. It's so much better. Well, maybe it's so much better because that's what you used, right? The other system could do pretty much the same, without disrupting the workflow of everybody who's been using it. But it is worth conversations, like how much money we're going to spend on introducing this new system, right? And what's the productivity loss for maybe you, one person, learning what we already have versus the rest of the staff learning the new system that you're about to bring, right? But all those conversations will have to happen on the foundation of writing down the features that organization needs and taking a sober look at the new system that somebody's fascinated with versus the system that organization already has, right? And they may have a legitimate concern, and the thing that they're fascinated with may be the best solution and it's truly worth bringing on board, right? But it has to be coldly evaluated based on facts and the needs.
Right. Well, and I think, and you probably come across this too, because I know I have throughout my career, people will have a system, like they'll have Microsoft 365, and it does pretty much everything you need, especially if you have the SharePoint platform as well, which they may have start calling that something else too. But when I was a CEO at an association for nursing home administrators, we had Microsoft 365, we had SharePoint, and yet they had piled on a patchwork quilt of other things like Asana to manage tasks. And I said, but it's already built into Outlook. We have a task thing in Outlook. The database didn't talk to the website. The website didn't talk to the database. Right before an annual meeting, I said, well, maybe we should update the website. It's been a really long time. I see we're many, many versions out of date. The staff was afraid the website would crash if they did it. So there's all of those kind of things that you already have. Like one of the things, and I had never even heard of this one. I, of course, had heard of Asana because that's pretty popular task management package, but they were using something called Blue Sky to do meeting minutes for like committee meetings. And I said, well, what do you do with Blue Sky? Well, you like type the notes up in Microsoft Word and then you put it in Blue Sky and it makes it a PDF. And I said, well, wouldn't it make more sense and save us a lot of time, to your point about staff time being used well? Wouldn't it make more sense to just put in Microsoft Word? And if you need to make it a PDF, you can, oh, thank you so much. That would be, and I'm like, why do you even do this? The previous CEO thought it was a good idea. I was like, oh,
You're absolutely right. And I am finding this patchwork, very duplicative collections of systems. Like many organizations use Microsoft Office 365 that offers already SharePoint and Microsoft Teams that come with to-do tasking, right? And Planner and OneNote and a full productivity and collaboration suite. That may not be as powerful as Asana, but for many tasks and for many workflows, Microsoft Planner sort of resembles Trello. I don't know if people are familiar with Trello. I think many heard of it. Does adequate enough job to move the projects along, right? But then people will use also Slack and Google Docs and Dropbox while having SharePoint. So it does take some work to simplify those things and educate people that no, it doesn't. We don't need to use all those systems because OneSuite and Microsoft can do all that, right? You will experience some discomfort and some productivity drop because you have to learn to move from Dropbox to SharePoint. But overall, we can remove the expense of paying for additional licenses, and we'll unify everything under the single platform that specifically integrates well with each other. And another thing that I wanted to bring everybody's attention to is Microsoft Power Automate, right? And that I think is very underused in our community because it is capable of automating a lot of internal office processes and procedures and workflows that frequently done manually, and staff wastes a lot of manual hours a week, replicated across everybody on staff, manually doing things that can be fully automated using Microsoft Power Automate.
Wow. Not that this is an ad for Microsoft, but I think a lot of us use it in the nonprofit world. Well, what is Microsoft Power Automate?
Automate, yeah. So before we're jumping in there, I'm not saying that I'm trying to advertise Microsoft. What I'm saying is that if you're already paying for Microsoft licenses, why not maximize what you can get from it, rather than paying for all the features that come with it and yet paying again for duplicative features from some other vendors. So my idea is to save money, right, and use existing tools to maximize their potential and the benefit organization gets from it. So Microsoft Power Automate, it comes standard with regular business standard licensing from Microsoft, and it's a workflow tool where you can say if you receive an email from a certain person that contains certain words, you can create a task in a planner for based on that email, assign it to a certain person and give it a deadline. Or if there is an Excel, if there is a row in Excel spreadsheet is altered in any way, you can take the data from that row and populate some other data, someplace else, or again, send an email to someone, create a task, request an approval, right? There are so many things that can be done with Power Automate to automate the workflows.
That's really interesting because the way you describe it, it sounds to me like Automate just brings together all of the entire suite, whether it's Excel, Outlook, Word, PowerPoint.
It does. It does.
Okay.
At one of the organizations I worked for, their publication department had a multi-step process of originating an article for a magazine until the article gets published in that magazine, right? There were many approvals that had to go through from the writer to the editor. Then the images had to be thrown in, edited, approved. And this entire process that used to be manual and somebody had to oversee that was fully automated using Microsoft Power Automate. And all the steps guided all the employees from step to step to step. So nothing was lost or fell through the cracks.
That's really amazing because, I'm a solopreneur like yourself, so I don't have the big package at Microsoft, but I do. No problem, Microsoft. If you want to become a sponsor of Radio Free 501c, just let me know. We're happy to advertise your products. But no, we do talk about a lot of different specific products on the podcast. So for example, I use Microsoft 365 and I also use Google Workspace for managing things. So it's because I use Squarespace for my website. So Google Workspace comes with Squarespace. So it all just kind of bundles together. And some of those things are very easy. Actually, I find that Word and Google in everything kind of is tending to integrate a little bit easier than it used to. So so the big companies are starting to realize that. But you mentioned earlier about so many subscriptions. I'm noticing more and more of the companies are charging for services now. For example, Google wants you to buy Google One to get more storage space. Have you seen that trend as well?
I ended up buying Google One for myself because I ran out of space for my photos, all the photos of my kids and my dog, right? And I didn't want to delete those, so I figured, all right, for $2 a month, I can do
that. That's why I ended up getting it, because I was running out of room on my hard drive on my Service Book. Another Microsoft product, just saying Microsoft. Look me up if you want to advertise. But seriously, my Surface Book was running really slow. And then I looked at the hard drive memory availability and it was red. The line was red. I was running out of room. And so it was because of all the videos I have from, doing podcasts over the years or doing courses with recordings and things. And so I need extra space to back them up where they wouldn't get lost so that I could free up some RAM, because that's why my hard drive was running slower. And it did help a lot to do that. But I was just really amazed that I ran out of space already. And it's funny though, trying to figure out, what am I going to use? You mentioned Dropbox, Google Drive. We use both at Rogue Tulips. So it's kind of like sometimes I have to go to Fern and say, I don't remember what folder this is in. Are this on the drive?
Yeah. And then different departments and organizations end up using their own, like one department uses Dropbox, another uses SharePoint, somebody uses Google, and documents are all over the place. It's hard to find anything. So consolidating, I think, is a worthy effort, I think, to make everything easier. And you can find things by using one search on one platform versus trying to hop from one to another, trying to like it. But on the topic of automation and integration, right? Even though we talked sometime about Microsoft, I'm not plugging Microsoft at all, but I wanted to speak a little bit about Zapier or similar tools that allow different vendors with different applications and solutions to talk to each other. Like, for example, one of the mechanisms to remove manual work from your staff that's overworked. I can illustrate on one example. Many associations we sell sponsorships, right? We sell. Sponsors can buy a webinar or a table at the conference or a booth or whatever, many different things that sponsors can buy. Sometimes they're fairly expensive items. In our organization, every time a sponsor purchases something, an internal staffer would have to go to Adobe eSign platform and bring up the template for signature, put in the name and the phone number and email address and address of the person who purchased the sponsorship item, and email it to them for e-signature before we can deliver the what was agreed upon under the sponsorship contract. Well, sometimes these people will sign it right away. Sometimes it will take them a week. Sometimes they'll forget to sign it. And people on our side will also forget that somebody didn't sign something, right? And it was taking time, because when you have like hundreds of sponsors constantly buying stuff, it's a lot of time. So what we have done using Zapier, we've automated this entire process. So whenever somebody purchases sponsorship from our AMS, it instantly alerted Zapier about this event, and Zapier in turn activated a DocuSign template, automatically entered the name and email address and all the relevant information of the person who needs to sign into the template, emailed it to whoever needed to sign on the sponsor side, and also created a task in Microsoft Office for an internal staffer to double check a week from now whether this document was signed or not. And all of a sudden, that freed up hours upon hours of time and created a reminder in case if document didn't get signed in 1 week. They say, oh, I need to reach out to that sponsor because the time is coming up. They need to pay us $20,000 and we still don't have a signed contract. It's just one example of many that can be done, sometimes even stringing Zapier automations and integration into the Microsoft Power Automate. So you can have flows that originate externally to Office into the internal Office automations, and opportunities there are only limited to your imagination.
That's really, you know, when somebody like yourself with all this knowledge and experience explains it, you just go, wow, they really make so much sense. Why didn't we notice that? And you know, it's like I always say, if people didn't need an objective third party to look at things and see what they're missing, consultants wouldn't have any work. I mean, that's really why you bring in somebody like us, because we see things differently and we can find those things and integrations and points and save you that time and effort. But I also think an important thing that relates to technology infrastructure, believe it or not, it might sound like a leap, but it's really not. And that's knowledge management. Because if you have everybody sharing everything in one place, whether it's Dropbox or SharePoint or Google Drive, whatever it is, you come up with your protocol for naming and placement and where you put it, and everybody has it. So like I've worked at places where they had a central F drive, and that's where everything has to be saved, for example. That's the major share drive. The reason that's important is because if people leave their job to go take another job, or they retire, or whatever life change happens to them, how are you supposed to find their stuff? And if it's on their hard drive, even if it's the organization's computer, how are you supposed to figure out how they were filing it? So it's really important to have that as well for your knowledge management overall going forward in the future.
Yes, that is an excellent point. And we actually instituted policy where people were not, I can't say not allowed, but were asked to not keep any corporate related information on their laptops, even though the laptops were shipped to them. Mm-hmm. Everything, since we work in Microsoft Office environment, right? Everybody has a space in the cloud. And we even asked not to keep anything on people's sort of corporate OneDrives, because it still sort of belongs to them. Because all the work is done on some kind of project. So if we use, let's say, teams and channels for your departments and teams around specific projects and channels to work on specific workflows for those projects, then they become storage of all the necessary artifacts. So because you work for some kind of project or for some kind of departments, everything you work on should be stored in there. So after we instituted this policy, whenever somebody left, nobody ever had to scramble to find like where those people kept their files, because they were always available to everybody. With a few exceptions, like for example, human resources, of course, cannot keep files available to everyone, right? Or executive director. There are some personal things that may need to be kept somewhat hidden, right, or protected. But those are exceptions. Normally for project work, that should be all on the shared space.
Well, and excellent point about privacy and confidentiality too, because that is something we always have to be aware of for people. So one of the things you and I talked about as we were planning this episode was your AMS. So, and one of the things you mentioned is that the AMS is not necessarily the center of the universe. So I think that's a really good point. But one of the things I've been talking to other IT people about the last couple of years is the future and or the fate of the AMS. There are people out there who do the kind of work you do, who think the integrated AMS is going the way of the dinosaur and that we shouldn't have it anymore. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
I fully agree with that. I don't think there is no room for AMS in the future. I think AMS is here to stay and must be an integral part of every organization, right? But as integrated AMS, or I should say monolithic AMS, right? This is the type of AMS that tries to do all those different things. In addition to member management, they try to do events, they try to do grant management, they try to do like learning management. They try to do like all those different things that AMS is trying to do that end up failing or doing substandard job at all those other modules, because they just simply don't have the singular focus on improving that particular module, right? The AMS part may be good, but everything else is sort of mediocre. So after I have realized, or my I guess, philosophy have evolved towards iPaaS-based architecture, I started to preach this sort of best of fit architectures, right? When you choose systems that are best for what you need. Not necessarily, you may have heard the term best of breed, right? This may not necessarily the best approach, because best of breed usually quite expensive and not everybody can afford the best of breed and may not necessarily need the best of breed. So you choose a system that really fits your needs as an organization, right? And as long as it can be integrated into the overall architecture using Zapier, for example, or something else, that's probably going to be an optimal thing when you can easily plug system into your architecture, or when they no longer meet your needs, unplug it, purchase something else and plug it in its place. And this way, AMS stops being the center of your universe. And it's never really meant to be a center of the universe. We kept talking about AMS, with all the data has to come into the AMS. You can't really accomplish that. They're not built to accommodate data from all other peripheral systems that your members touch, from all the touch points, right? So, and this actually led to the rise of data lakes and data analytics platforms like Association Analytics, for example, or Gravitate Solutions, or a couple others, because AMS just cannot do that. So let AMS do what it's best at, managing members and renewals and activities around the membership, right? And let other systems integrate with it, and let the data lake absorb all this data and then provide you with dashboards and reports and analytics. And in this architecture, any system can be easily replaced. Well, not easily. I mean, nothing is easy, right?
Yeah, right. No,
right.
If only it were.
but at least it's surmountable challenge.
No, this really, and you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned that about data lakes because more than a few years ago now, I guess it was like back in 2017, 2018, we were talking about data warehouses and we wouldn't be able to access the stuff in the data warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about data lakes. Then we were talking about data wells. Now we're talking about data rivers. I mean, what exactly are we fishing? What are we doing with our data now? What are we calling it?
Actually, I don't know what to call this thing, right? But the data needs to have a place, right? Mm-hmm. It needs to have a place, and preferably you will retain ownership of this data. And as other systems come and go, they should be able to continuously feed the information about your members and constituents and their touch points and their activities into that central data repository. Well, lake, river.
Yeah, it was like a lake. Somebody told me one time, oh, it's a lake now because it all sits there together. And then somebody said, oh, now it's a river because the data is constantly evolving and changing and moving. And I'm like, okay, because, it's been my experience. Once data gets captured in a field, that's pretty much it. Well, in the record, it's old now.
Well, the point is the whole point of the integration between all of those systems is that the data is constantly updated, so it doesn't get stale. So let's say information about your member goes into the data lake. As soon as this member changes their last name or phone number, or email address, it instantly notifies the data lake system and says, okay, here's the new information about that member. So that has to stay current. So the data governance and how the data flows between those systems is an important consideration.
Well, and I know with tech stacks, and actually, Misha, for the audience who may not know exactly what tech stack means, could you explain that?
Usually just funky term for a collection of various software systems organization possesses, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have Microsoft Office and Dropbox and an AMS and a learning management system and an event management system, right, and an email marketing system, an abstract submission system and speaker management system, all of those things together are usually called tech stack, right?
Okay. I just wanted to make sure everybody kind of knew what that meant because I learned that term when I was doing a certification for it was actually a certificate program for virtual event planning. And they kept talking about the tech stack. You have to build your tech stack for your virtual event. And I was like, oh, what a cool word. And I used it like every chance I got for about 3 months after that. I was like, well, when you're discussing your tech stack, we have to take all these things into account. But it's basically all the things you've been talking about. Does it integrate? Are there integrations we need to add to that to make it work? And I think maybe we all have done something like this in our career without thinking about it that way. Because we think about, we have the AMS, we have the integrated AMS. Well, that means it has other add-ons, like it comes with a website and the website includes a blog and you can have an online community. There's some out there that are like that, but you still need to have external integrations. Like, for example, I know there's some out there, you have to still get an integration, go to QuickBooks if you want to use the QuickBooks add-in or whatever, Quicken, whichever one you're using. So there's a lot of different things like that as well. So I think when we're talking about that, a lot of people, of course, we all know what AMS means, Association Management System, but customer relationship management, CRMs, I'm seeing a lot of people start to use those instead of an AMS. What have you seen that, or what are your thoughts on that?
I see some of that. I haven't personally had any experience with using CRMs in place of AMS. And in fact, I prefer not to use the term AMS, Association Management System, because I prefer to use MMS, which is Member Management System, right? Because I want to be more specific about what's the goal of that piece of software is. And in my world, the goal of that piece of software is manage members, not to manage an entire association. Because we have that tech stack, we have different systems that allow association to function. So as a term, Association Management System, I prefer to never speak of that again and just get terminology.
No, that's actually a really good point, because There's a lot of nonprofits out there that are not membership groups. They're foundations or charities. And so they have stakeholders. They don't really have members, or they have donors. So they might be using I don't even know. Does anybody use Razor's Edge anymore? That used to be the in one, but they might be using, fundraising software or some other kind of software too. So I think that's really good. I think actually, maybe we all should start thinking about our tech infrastructure, and that's going to change. Now, I know I'm a solopreneur, and Fern Carbonell of Fern Carbonell Services is a contractor who works with me and helps me kind of run the back end on stuff. But once or twice a year, we do a technology infrastructure review and see, what are we using? How are we using it? Do we need to keep using it? And that sounds like that might be a good procedure to build into the annual schedule for most nonprofit organizations. What do you think of that?
Absolutely. It is absolutely critical. Well, first of all, I hope that most organizations have some kind of technology strategy that outlines their short and mid and long-term idea how they tech stack, right, is going to evolve over the years. But it needs to be reviewed at least once a year, right, to see, well, what has worked, what has not worked, where are we on those different systems. When renewal times comes up, do we need to replace that system or not? Has it been functioning? Had we make a mistake bringing system X into the fold, and should we reevaluate it and take it out? So continuous review is also critical. But in addition, I think what happens frequently in associations, especially on the smaller side of the spectrum, who do not have a IT person or CIO kind of person who oversees the overall strategy, frequently departments just go out on their own and just buy software that seems to fit their needs. Like a membership department will go out and research member management systems and like something and bring it into the fold, or events department will go bring event system without necessarily talking it through with everybody else or involving entire organization in making those decisions. So as a result, they'll bring in the system that perhaps answers their specific needs, but doesn't work well with all other systems that are used in that organization. But because they already signed the 3-year contract, the rest of the organization has to deal with this pain of the system that either does not talk to theirs, right, for the next 3 years, right, or presents significant challenges and requires manual workaround, some kind of Excel spreadsheet uploads and downloads and manual cleanup because something doesn't work. So having some kind of IT person, maybe there are many organizations that offer fractional CIO services, right? If you don't have your own, to oversee and have this holistic view of your organization, understands its needs across all departments, and help guide the strategy of selecting systems that will be good for the whole of the organization, as opposed to, like, let's say, just one department, will go a long way to the future.
Well, I'm just kind of shuddering hearing you describe that scenario, because it happens, and it happens a lot.
It does.
And I am just shuddering hearing that, because as an executive, that's just not how you make decisions. It is, you don't have one department just run off and buy some software and go, oh, look what I got. It just doesn't work that way. And it can't work that way if you want to have an integrated system that actually saves you time and doesn't cost you more time, which I know is one of the points that you have brought home to us today in this conversation about that, is the integrations aren't helping you, they're actually hurting you in the long run.
Yeah.
But that's just like a whole other issue with I went out and bought a different software package that doesn't talk to anything or anyone, and it's all mine. And I guess sometimes people think that is job security or something. It's like the people who hold their knowledge really close to the vest because they think they'll never get fired because, well, I'm the only one who knows this.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. And but actually, you're making me think of a somewhat funny story. I used to work at a specialty bar association for corporate attorneys, the American Corporate Counsel Association, which is now the Association for Corporate Counsel. And at the time, we had about just about 10,000 members, or at least 10,000 member records. And we had our data all stored at an offsite company provider. And we had one of those big green module monitor things that we had to log into to type in. They got hit by lightning and they lost 30 days of data. Just poof, gone. And no backup, no way to know what to do. So our director of membership and marketing at the time, that she was tasked with, okay, you need to go out and find us a new system that we can bring in-house, because she made a pitch and she made the argument. She had a good proposal. So the CSE, Chief Staff Executive, said, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Go out and then find out what we should do. So she found an Apple-based database system, said, okay, we can get all of our records. They're going to be imported into the system. All the records that are not updated will be all uppercase, and we'll know. And then we're going to send out a letter to all the members. That's how long ago this was. We still sent mail to people. Send it out to everybody. And then the ones who send it back with corrections will update it. And then we'll know every time we've updated a record, because we'll fix it to title case. Out of the 10,000 people we sent it to, like 8,200 of them responded. We had mailbag after mailbag after mailbag coming into the office, and we had to stay late, work weekends to go through these 8,000 pieces of paper, update everything. So I think, that's a prime example of how far we've come, I think, with technology and the ability to do backups. There's lots of different backup systems out there. There's, like, I personally use Carbonite. We've already talked about Google One being able, you can expand your online cloud storage and things like that. So I think when we think of, if we kind of try to think back to the way we used to have to do things, where we did do a lot of manual things, it brings us back to that old thing of charging people $25 to apply. And that was because somebody had to manually enter it into the data system. But every time you do that, you're opening a door to making errors and having bad data. And so some of the things that you've brought up today have really shown a light on that, I think, about where are we keeping the data, and then how are we grabbing the data, whether it's in a river or a warehouse or a lake, wherever you happen to keep your data. So no, that was really great. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I am not an IT expert like you are, but I love talking about technology and how it's a tool to help us get our work done easier and quicker and better, and bring our teams together. You also mentioned about it can make us more creative. Did you want to make a quick comment on how it unleashes our creativity?
Well, that was in a slightly different context when we were talking about how technology can automate. I'm not going to touch on the ChatGPT and AI conversations, because that's a completely different topic, right?
That's another episode.
That's another episode, right? But within the context of what we were talking about, integrations and automations, being able to automate the daily routine grinding work of your staff, right, releases their time to be more creative, right? Finding more creative solutions for your members, right? For your organization, improving things, thinking bigger, as opposed to being mired every day in updating member records, for example. That can be, those updating member records can be most likely automated. And I say most likely because my previous job, we automated a lot of fields that were changing in one place. We created automated processes that will change them in some other place, somewhere else. Something that used to be manual or required the data dumps and uploads, all of that instantly was happening through the automation. And all of a sudden, people now they free from this mundane, mind-numbing work. and some express fear like, well, we're going to automate my job out of existence. No, it actually gives you, I can't say like gives you wings, right? No, but it keeps your mind up to be a more productive member of the employee for your organization, right? And focus on creating member value versus then on these mundane things that you sort of feel like you're part of a machine,
Yeah. Well, and that answers the question that we all have, trying to manage everything that we need to do, administrative things, technology things, and then we want to do these other bigger things. And that answers the question, if only I had more time.
Yeah.
If only I had more energy, I could do these other things. And so that's what a lot of the information and advice you shared in this episode can help us do. So now I know you're first time guest, so I will just let you know, I always like to ask my guest, what is the one thought you would like the audience to take away today from this wonderful conversation about better using our technology? And then how can they get in touch with you if they'd like to follow up or learn more?
Well, I guess the main idea is that technology now has evolved to the point where any organization, even a very small one, even an organization of 1 or 2 staff, right, can afford automations and integrations that are offered by the standardized platform. I can share that at my organization, all these automations we were running on Zapier cost us $600 a year, right? So that becomes, and there were lots of automations running, right? And there are other platforms that are even cheaper than that. Like for example, make.com. So don't let yourself think that it's out of reach because it's difficult or expensive. It's now technology made it easy and inexpensive and achievable without major or significant effort or need to study, right? So help is out there. It doesn't cost much, and anybody can become a very efficient organization and be able to accelerate your internal processes and member service delivery. Yeah, it's there. So the time is now.
That's great. Well, how can people get in touch with you, Misha, if they'd like to talk with you some more or perhaps work with you?
Well, my email is Misha, MISHA at 501evolved.com. So that's the easiest way to reach me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I love your company name.
Right.
It stands out. I really like it. So, well, I want to thank Misha for joining me this week to share all of his knowledge. Well, not all of it, but a good peek into his knowledge he can do for all of us when it comes to technology questions and helping us find the best solutions. And we all know that technology is a really important part of what we do every day, even if we're not thinking about it. So thank you for joining me, Misha.
Absolutely. It was a delightful conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are welcome. Thank you. So, well, we have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next time with another exciting episode of Radio Free 501c. If you haven't already subscribed or followed us, please do. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can follow us on Spotify. We've done way more episodes than the Duchess of Sussex. Yes, I keep teasing her about that, but it's fun. Anyway, so you can follow us on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, or you can find us on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the major services. So look us up. And if you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help you bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. You can look at our services page. And if you don't see exactly what you're looking for, contact me and we'll talk about it. And if you are looking for continuing education for nonprofit management professionals in the area of exam preparation, ethics, or a variety of topics we offer through our Second Wednesday webinar series, check out our education program, the 501c League. I was joking with Misha earlier about how people screw up the name of my program, and I just did it. The 501c League is an education program so big, it has its own website, the 501cleague.net. So check out both of those. Contact me if you have questions. And on behalf of Misha and myself, thanks for joining us.